Well, welcome, guys. This is awesome. This is just the keys and electric guitar workshop, talking about creating moments, thinking about padding, gluing together the elements of a worship set, how we can do these things well with our sounds, with what we play and how we play off of each other, and utilize each other as a team. I have two friends with me here today. On my right, I got Ethan C. on electric guitar, and on my left, Ben Glanzer on keys. Would y'all like to share just a little bit about yourselves? What
Sure.
y'all are, where y'all are serving, your local churches, and
Yeah.
that'd be
Like
awesome.
Trey said, my name is Ben. I went to A&M. I graduated in 21, so very recently. Right now, I'm living in League City. I'm a first-year medical student at UTMB. Any, pre-med or health stuff? No? Okay, just checking. Uh, I have been playing keys just kind of in a volunteer role throughout college. Right now, I'm serving at a church called Bayou City Fellowship, which is in kind of the Houston area. I have some friends there. And then that guy right over there is Sydney. I travel with him from time to time and do some key stuff as well. But yeah, that's kind of me. That's kind of where I'm serving at right now, kind of where I'm coming from.
Yeah. My name is Ethan. I'm currently at DBU studying music business. I'm a member at Watermark Church, and I serve at Watermark Church pretty regularly, Sundays and then throughout the week. And I also travel with Sydney for stuff. And yeah, I've been playing for a decade now, so not too long, but getting there.
How old are you?
We're not going to talk about that.
He's a young guy.
I'm young.
Well,
I'm
cool.
trying to do the math.
That's awesome. Well, thank you guys for being here.
Yeah,
We're
man.
really grateful to have y'all. For those of y'all who haven't met me, my name's Trey Jordan. I'm the worship minister at our Southwood campus of Grace. And just show of hands, who in here plays keys? Okay. How about electric guitar? Anyone else? Like drummers? Whoa, dude. That's awesome. So anyone who doesn't serve at Grace Bible Church? Just nice. 4 people. That's awesome. Cool. Well, thank y'all for being here. Big reason why we're doing this is to just work at our crafts with enthusiasm unto the Lord. Sneak peek. There's nothing in the scriptures that I'm going to point to that say keys and electric guitar are the best instruments to do this with. There's nothing in there. But what we're doing is just pursuing excellence for the glory of God. And also, we're not just here to learn how to do things on keys and electric better, learn how to craft tones better. But what we really want to do is give you guys some more resources, some more opportunities to pull bits and pieces of knowledge and experience to then invest in other musicians. So if you came here today just to learn how to pad better, how to play keys better, that's awesome, but I'm going to ask that you enlarge your vision a little bit. So think about, before we even talk about any piece of knowledge or technique, think about who you can share this with immediately after. They might be in this room, they might be somewhere else, but if you can be thinking about who you can invest in, that is what will make these things have the most impact. That will be what serves the church for many years to come. And that's just a huge issue, honestly, that we have right now, is that we don't have a lot of musicians developing other musicians. We have a lot of overworked church staff that are doing their best but can't get to everyone. And we have holes on Sunday mornings. We're running tracks to fill musician spots, and the best way to attack that is for y'all in these chairs to take notes, take bits and pieces of what you've learned, and then go share it with other people. And so Grace Bible Church, we've put together some resources called Foundations videos that will talk about a lot of this stuff, but I think the really sweet thing about today will be for you guys to hear from Ben and Ethan. And so I'm not going to do a lot of talking. I'm just kind of be facilitating most of this, and I'm going to let you guys hear from some real pros and guys who really do this really, really well. And so with all that said, we're going to keep moving. We have quite a bit of time. We're going to try and be out of here by 6 o'clock, but if you think of things that you want to ask Ben and Ethan, take note of that, and we'll do a bit of a Q&A session at the very end, just for time's sake. And so I think with that, I'd love to just read a psalm for us. Psalm 100 says, "Shout out praises to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with joy. Enter his presence with joyful singing. Acknowledge that the Lord is God. He made us, and we belong to him. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give him thanks. Praise his name, for the Lord is good. His loyal love endures, and he is faithful through all generations." Now, what we see here is that the reason for our joy, the reason we come into God's courts with praise, is simply that we are his people and he created us. Okay, let's pause for a sec. So the Psalms are incredible, but I think all of us, at to some degree, we're thinking, okay, where are we going with this? Why do we start with the Psalm? Where are we going? So I want to do that again, and I want Ben and Ethan to jump in and kind of help me create this moment, okay? So, Psalm 100, a thanksgiving psalm. It says, "Shout out praises to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with joy. Enter his presence with joyful singing, and acknowledge that the Lord is God. He made us, and we belong to him. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. So enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give him thanks. Praise his name, for the Lord is good. His loyal love endures, and he's faithful through all generations." Now, a couple of big differences here. Thanks, guys. That was fantastic. So, the concept behind padding or creating moments, transitional pieces with keys and electric. Any photographers in the room? Like anyone who's ever done any photo, anything like that? Okay, perfect. So you see in a lot of really good photos what's called a bokeh effect. Okay, it's where the subject of a picture is very, very in focus, and the way that happens is blurring the background, okay? So similar to that effect, when the scriptures are read, when there's a call to worship giving, when any speaking moment is happening and some really luscious pads come in, nice textures come in, what happens is this music, this little bed of sound helps to keep our brains from wandering, and it helps us focus on the subject, right? Which in this case was Psalm 100. And so music has a really interesting effect in that regard. And this is a really interesting passage in 1 Samuel 16, but I think it illustrates the effect that music has on our souls, our spirits, our minds, and helps us stay focused. So it's really interesting. There's some complexities here, but the principle that we're going to talk about is pretty straightforward. So 1 Samuel 16, verse 14. "Now the Spirit of the Lord had turned away from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord tormented him. Then Saul's servants said to him, 'Look, an evil spirit from God is tormenting you. Let our Lord instruct his servants who are here before you to look for a man who knows how to play the lyre. Then whenever the evil spirit from God comes upon you, he can play the lyre, and you will feel better.'" Skipping down to verse 23. "So whenever the Spirit from God would come upon Saul, David would take his lyre and play it. This would bring relief to Saul and make him feel better. Then the evil spirit would leave him alone." So at a minimum, we see that music has a therapeutic effect on our spirits. It helps calm us. It helps. Imagine walking into a Sunday morning, and I've realized this in the last 6 months of trying to get your kids up, out of bed, dressed, and ready for church, and that it's just chaos is what you've experienced for the first hour of your day. You walk into the room, and your mind is just scattered. So when you come in and you're able to focus and you feel comforted by the music that's being played over a welcome moment or over the first song, it's really helpful for us to achieve what we're trying to achieve. And so other things padding does just between moments, it helps us maintain a unified worship set. So it helps us glue all of our songs together, all of our scripture readings, all the calls to worship. It helps us make our sets appear cohesive, like we designed them to be. I don't think many of us are planning sets just to, we sing song 1, we stop, then we sing song 2, stop, we read a verse, stop, song 3, and we're just picking and choosing things to do back to back. We really want to tell a unified story, and padding and all that stuff helps us to do that. So that's a little bit of the why. Now, why keys and electric? There are situations where drumming and bass can be helpful, but in terms of the flexibility of the instrument that we use for padding, keys and electric really provide us with the greatest ability to go low, be soft, and then be really energetic as well without going into a full song. And so there's a lot of dynamic range that we have with these instruments. So that's kind of why, we spend a lot of time talking about how do we pad well on keys? How do we complement those pads with electric really well? And so that's kind of a bit of the why behind talking about padding, why it's important, why we've chosen the instrument. So I want to give Ben and Ethan a bit of time just to talk about the very basic elements of their keys and electric setups that allow them to do this well. So Ben, do you want to start? And
Sure.
Another thing too is there are so many different options for setting up a keys rig, setting up an electric rig, and what you'll find is that these guys have over time really not focused on, well, I have to have this exact pedal, I have to have this exact plugin, but they've taken what they have and what they like, what they're comfortable with, and they've manipulated these things and tweaked them to where they're helpful in many different instances. So why don't you take it away, Ben?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad. Yeah, I definitely want to just clarify that we will do our best not to just be overwhelming with 100 different softwares or pedals or something. We're going to try to give you just a handful of the most basic kind of tools in the toolbox that we're thinking about every time we come into a set. So we'll start with the keys rig. And again, with keys, there are a lot of different ways to do this. You're probably wondering why I don't have a Nord, because all worship keys players have Nords. I can't afford one. That's the real reason. But you can also, there's MainStage, if you're familiar with that. There's stuff like Keyscape. There's other resources that you can use for that. So I want to just be sure that the advice I'm giving is not like, hey, you have to go get this one specific thing. I'm going to try and be like vaguer than that and give kind of just some general ideas and some things to be thinking about for you to write down. And then if you want to talk specific gear, specific software, stuff like that, very happy to talk about that afterwards and talk about resources and things like that for people that are into that. So when I'm going into a set, there's kind of two basic philosophies for keys that you hear out there. The first philosophy is that basically you have a patch that you build for each song. So song 1, if it's going to be, say, Great Things in A, okay, I'm going to build a patch in my computer or in the Nord or somewhere and have it all set up. Okay, these are the sounds that I need for this song. And then I go to the next one. Okay, what's the next song? What do I need for that? And maybe those will be different. And so I actually am part of like the second philosophy, and that is just that I have acquired kind of a handful of different tools, maybe 10 that will give me enough kind of versatility and kind of variety that I can use just one patch for any song for the most part, and I shouldn't have to add too much or program anything extra ahead of time. So when I set up for the morning, I'm setting up my computer, and I have all of my sounds that I might need for the day written down or loaded in, and then I have the set list written down. And so I'll talk about a few of those things, but that's actually probably the philosophy that I would more recommend. It helps you be a little more flexible, and it helps us get away from trying to overly, program our services and overly try and, be too rigid about the structure that we're doing. If you have all the tools that you need available to use, then whatever moment comes up, if the worship leader decides to all of a sudden build up a song that was supposed to be just like a down little tag or something, then you have, the sounds that you need, the pads or whatever, just right there to be able to insert without having to freak out because you didn't build a patch that way for that. So that's kind of my take on that. So let me talk about just a few of the things that I have loaded up in this. I'll talk about keys first, then I'll talk about like pads, synth stuff second. So I have my key sound. And so when I'm looking for a sound, I really like the way an upright piano sounds. The choice is pretty much between that or like a grand piano is kind of the basic. I don't think there's really a right or a wrong. I like how the upright sounds a little less perfect, I think, than a grand piano. Like there's just some ways that kind of the notes interact together that gives it sort of a rugged kind of almost kind of gritty feel. And I kind of like that because I don't, sometimes I worry that, in church or in settings like that, I'm always hesitant to try and act too polished, or like I have it all together, not to make it like too spiritual, but sometimes I think it's nice when you have a little bit of that kind of ruggedness and a little bit of that complexity. It's not just too perfect of a sound. It keeps the music kind of interesting. And so I just have this upright that I have, and this is what I use for every song. So I can modify the sound to some degree, but this is what I use for every single song that I'm playing. Is some variation of this.
What would you be modifying if you modified it at all?
So I think I'm going to talk about two things. The first thing is a parameter called color, and I'll let you listen to kind of what that sounds like. But basically, it's going to take the piano from being bright to dark, or back again. And I know that's like a visual description for something auditory, which makes no sense. But I'll let you listen to it, and you can kind of see what I'm talking about. So this is as bright as I can get. And I'll let you listen to it go to dark. Here how it's kind of more muted. So this would be definitely more of kind of an intimate setting you might use this for. Here it's more muted. Maybe somebody's talking and I'm kind of underneath. It's not too intrusive. Versus if we're in the middle of like Great Things by, Phil Wickham, that doesn't pop as much as something that's a little crisper, you know what I mean? So typically when I'm looking at a song, usually something that's gonna be big, full band, full energy, something brighter is gonna cut through the mix a little more and be heard. Alternatively, I can speak English. If we're playing something that's maybe a little more, kind of like All Sons and Daughters or Pat Barrett, it's big, but it's kind of open. It's a little more quiet. It's not like the, full-blown electric guitars and stuff, but there's still drums and stuff. I tend to feel like a brighter piano sounds good in that.
It's like a roomy
kind
of vibe. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think color is a great control to have your hands on because it allows you to take one, keyboard sound and then kind of modify it as you need for different situations. Because there's just songs where, that's too much. That's too crisp. It's cutting too much. You need to dial it back to something more muted like that.
That's good.
So so that's color. And the other thing that I'm always fiddling with is reverb. And so reverb is almost the opposite of that. Reverb is something I feel like that I want more of generally when things are kind of down and keys are standing out a little more. if we're in a very full band setting, then reverb is one thing that very, very easily makes the mix muddy and just kind of makes everything sound just not very good. So it's good by itself, not great when we're all together. So I'll let you listen to what my reverb sounds like. So here's basically none of it, and I'll just turn it up to an obnoxious level. So reverb's what gives it like that long kind of tail. It just goes on for like 20 seconds. So I don't really think there's any real setting that I would use.
That's not even a pad. That's just reverb.
Right. This is just piano, nothing else. So this is probably too much. That's really too much for any setting. However, a little bit on a song that is more keys heavy can sound really nice. Let me think. Let me do like Waymaker. So you can hear how it kind of complements that setting. But that's one that I would be, you want to be cautious to be too heavy-handed with, because again, it's just something that can make the mix very, very muddy. And for a long time when I played, I just thought that more reverb was the way, and it's really not always the way. And so be cautious with that one. And your sound guy will probably like you more if you don't just have a 30-second reverb on everything. But it is a nice parameter to kind of know your way around a little bit. And so I would definitely, if whatever your rig looks like, whatever you have control over, if you have some kind of reverb that you can play around with and kind of know how to adjust for different settings, that's going to be great. Whether that's, something that's like native to the laptop, or whether if you have a Nord and you look into getting like a Big Sky or some kind of a pedal that's going to, in an analog way, kind of provide that reverb, that's a great parameter to have control over. And that's really it for keys. That's what I'm thinking about for those sounds.
So to summarize, pick your piano, whether that's upright or grand. Upright, a little more warm, a little more rugged, a little more rootsy. And then you want to control your color, right? So basically your warmth or brightness and your reverb.
Yeah.
Pretty much it?
That's pretty much it.
That's great. Talk about your pads.
All right, so pad.
What is a pad?
A pad is really a synth.
Yeah.
It's a synth sound that has been modified to take away a lot of just the kind of attack and the fullness of it. And so the result you get when you're left at the end is something that's very soft. The remainder of the sound is something that is very gentle. And in a worship setting, it is kind of really the backbone of what we do. Whether somebody's speaking or whether a song is starting this way. And so a pad is a great tool. It can also, just like reverb, be extremely muddy if you don't know how to use it. So even just listening to the difference between this versus, that's like a lot more notes, a lot easier to get muddy versus the simplicity of something like that. So pads is so the world of synth is something that is extremely complex, and I'm going to be very straight with you. I really don't understand it. I can manipulate a couple things with it, and that's how I've kind of pieced this together. But my pads, I have really dialed in just by listening to stuff and kind of downloading resources that other people have put together and kind of choosing the ones that I liked and kind of training my ear to listen for those things, and then just piecing something together that I like and that feels good. But I didn't sit down and like read a book about analog synthesis to like put these together, and you don't have to do that either. If you can do that, that's great. That's amazing. I don't have the capacity for that, but that's okay. There's a lot of like resources that you can get, like pre-mixed pads and synths and stuff like that, stuff that works in MainStage. You can download presets for the Nord even. I think Peter James has some stuff that's dialed in for that. And so afterwards, I'd love to give you guys just some websites and stuff if you're interested about where my sounds came from. But let me talk about why I picked the ones that I did, and then a couple elements of synthesis that you should have down. So what I have is a pad. I have two actually that I run, and I layer them together. I have one that I call my high one and my low one. So you can probably guess that this is the high one. So the reason I like them separated out like that is when somebody, I don't know if y'all do this at Grace, but at my church, whenever the pastor gets to like his final point, they like send the keys guy up there to like play the landing music.
100%.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't necessarily like to go up there in that moment and just be like, because it's a lot all at once. So what I like to do is sneak in there. I have my highs separated out so that I can be a little more gradual with it. And then that gives me something nice to build on when the rest of the band comes in. It kind of changes the sound and it kind of lets your brain transition, if that makes sense. To kind of, okay, this is the next moment. Here's more fullness. But also in a way that's not playing on top of whoever's speaking or whoever's talking. So I have a pad that's dedicated to kind of like high, like shimmery stuff. So those are the things I would be listening for. Listen for kind of shimmery sounds. Listen for just kind of that almost, like I really like kind of how that's almost sort of uneasy. And there's sort of, that's kind of what shimmer does, is makes it just almost a little uneasy. But that's just a really nice texture. Versus something that's just going to be solid, like nothing crazy, just very basic. Here, I'll let you listen to this one by itself. So it's just very, there's none of those other shimmery textures or anything. And so by itself, it sounds a little, it works, but added this one in there, it just has so much more texture and life when they work together. So those are some of the things I'd be thinking about when whatever pad you land on. You don't necessarily need like 2 or 3, but when you have that kind of capacity to layer them differently or kind of play around with the volume of different ones, it gives you some control that can surprisingly be really helpful in some situations. It's almost kind of like color that we talked about with the piano a little bit. It just lets you sort of tailor each song to kind of what you need. Okay, so that's those. Yeah, what's up?
I was going to ask, and you may be getting here, but similar to the things that you're manipulating on your key sounds, what are the things that you need to have control over with your pads?
For sure. So the first thing I would learn is your attack and delay on a synth. And so that's it's easy. Don't worry, this is the easy part of synthesis. It's basically when you hit a note, how long does it take for the note to do something? And then when you let go, how quickly does it go away? And so you can listen to this. Let me listen to this one. So that attack is pretty quick. It's pretty much as soon as I clicked it, it went there. Here it is again. So it's very fast. But the delay you can listen to is a little longer. It doesn't cut off quite as quick. And so I find that that's helpful for that low sound when it's time to bring that in. Here's the other one. So it's just a slight little bit more of a swell into it. And so that sound specifically on pad is kind of nice when you're isolated by yourself, if you're just padding or if there's nothing too crazy full band going on. Having a little bit longer of an attack control just helps things be a little softer, and each note kind of blends into the other one a little easier. And so I find that very, very simple parameter all of a sudden makes you have an instrument that's kind of really kind of like blending together very well and becoming very musical rather than just jumping from one note to the next. And I think on pad especially, that's really nice.
And then when you bring your piano in as a layer with it,
yeah,
the piano is probably the fastest attack of any instrument that you'll have.
Right.
And so if you can let your pads get out of the way for those first piano hits.
Right, exactly.
That's helpful.
For sure. That definitely helps. Okay, and then the other thing, if you don't learn anything else about synthesis, this is what you have to understand, is what a low-pass filter is. And so a lot of you probably do know that. It's a very widely and well-used and amazing tool in music. But if you don't, it's very simple. Basically, when you have a synth, it is delivering a very full spectrum of sound, all the way from the lows, all the way to the highs, all the way up to like the very too high. I'm trying to think let me see if I have an example of that. Like just, yeah. That's like a very classic, oh, I wonder what this synth sounds like. Oh, okay, wow, that's a lot. So low pass. This is what low pass filter does. Is basically it's a filter. It's well named that allows the lows to pass. Actually, I guess it's not well named because it has nothing to do with the lows. It's rolling off the highs, basically. So you start with the highs, and then you have this little filter, basically. And once you start moving this parameter, it's going to start coming down and cutting off more and more of the highs until you're left with no highs, just kind of this low mid stuff. And so what a nice sounding pad is a synth that has had a low pass filter that's really tailored off so much of all that obnoxious high stuff that you're left with just the lows and the mids. It has this nice kind of warm feeling. The highs in music is really where a lot of your energy comes from. Think like cymbals and stuff like that. That's very like crisp and all the way up there as high as you can get. And so that's what we're trimming off with the low pass filter. Now that being said, when you have trimmed all that off, it's amazing to be able to have control over that and then go in the opposite direction for dynamics. Does that make sense? So that's a great thing to have control over. It's also it can be tricky to have set up the way you want it because I understand you're playing keys. You got a million things to do with your fingers. The most common way they have it set up is there's kind of a wheel usually to the side of the keyboard. It's called a mod wheel that you can tailor to be able to adjust that cutoff of your synth. And so if you can learn how to play with that and be able to play maybe a diamond or a whole note and then adjust that as you're going, that's a great thing to be able to learn to do at the same time. It's tricky, and it's tricky to think about. I was never very good at it. So what I did is I bought just a little expression pedal. So you can see me. This is what I'm manipulating down here. So I find that that's the easiest way because if I'm playing stuff with my hands, I don't have to reach over to something else. If that makes sense. So this pedal, it's not very expensive. If you do play with a Nord, they have a slot especially for an expression pedal, so you could very easily figure out how to program that into your setup, man, to do it. But man, just taking a little time to learn how to kind of have that control over dynamics really makes a huge difference in just the ability of loudness and softness that you're able to control. So low pass filter absolutely is a must. And also, as a keys player, if you have control over this parameter and you're referencing it and you understand it, you don't have to be stressed that you're going to come up to pad, the pastor's wrapping up his message, and you're going to, pad in with, just too much all at once. So you have control over it. You're making sure that low-pass filter is down when you start so that you come in with something nice, more like that. So those two things are, in my opinion, really the main things that you need to understand with pads to, just really take yourself to a very, very high level that's very musical and very dynamic and very fitting, especially in a worship set. And that's really it. There's a million other things you could go into. There's all kinds of shimmer effects and all of that stuff, and that's awesome. I really don't know a whole lot about that world. I know some obviously, but it's really those two things that are, I think, the backbone of what's worth spending some time really practicing and kind of understanding.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you've demonstrated a really dynamic sound with a piano and two pads and then just changing settings. That's really awesome. And the settings on the pad were you had your high pad, you had your low pad, you had the attack and release settings optimized for use with your piano and long sustain, and then your filter. And that was it, right? Did I miss anything?
That's
awesome.
it.
So in 2 minutes, could you talk about how you think through balancing the pads with your pianos?
For
Because
sure.
right now we're running out of the same output. Ben has a left and a right that's all going into the mixer back there. So
Yeah.
sometimes you'll run 4 outputs and separate them. But if you're running 2 channels only,
Yeah.
how are you thinking about that?
Man, so I always, when possible, want to have them separated out, running 4 channels or 3 channels, but just something that gives the sound guy some control over that dynamic. Because then at that point, that's just one less thing that my brain necessarily has to worry about in the moment. But if I didn't have that capacity, and there's plenty of settings where that's the case, you don't have enough channels, you need to run keys left and right, and then you need to run your synth left and right out of those same 2 channels. My philosophy is always that keys need to stand out way more than the pad. So what I'm approaching right now, just listening, to the house. I don't have my ears on or anything, but when I'm layering this in, I hesitate to go even much further than that. The goal of my pad is not that it's a vocal instrument. It's not. It is a background kind of a texture. If it is, here, and my keys are the background texture, that doesn't really make sense. It sounds fine, but it's not the best way, if that makes sense. The reason we use it and the reason it works well in this setting is that it provides a sort of a background texture for the keys. That being said, I've definitely spent time kind of listening to these things, and I've also learned where that level is on my keyboard. So I know that my faders need to be right about here, and that's typically where it's going to be a good balanced sound. And I might vary from that kind of based on what I hear, but it's also, there's no substitute for knowing your instrument and kind of playing around with these things and kind of understanding where the normals are for those values as well.
That's awesome. Thanks, Ben. Ethan, let's kick over to you.
do
So
this.
first of all, just real briefly explain, how you're viewing your role in all of this, because Ben has just demonstrated this massive wall, he's got 10 fingers and a sustain pedal to hit all the notes that he wants, and you have 6 strings and 5 fingers, and you can't use all. I mean, I don't know how to use my thumb with a bunch of chords. So just talk about that first, and then go into your setup.
Totally. So as guitar players, we sit in this weird part of the mix where the keys and the bass and the drums, they're all kind of, it's all gushing together in this mid-range kind of. And so we're trying to find a way to poke through in certain parts of the songs. And so with lead lines, mid-range is your most important tool. That's going to push you above the mix, above everything else. You can turn your pedals up real high with all the treble in them, and it's just going to sound harsh, and that's not going to get you anywhere. So for lead lines, mid-range, and then for swells and stuff, we're kind of sitting back in the mix and blending everything together. Sort of in the same range as keys a little bit, but we're just trying not to get in the way. This is not a rock concert. Church is not a rock concert. And so we're just trying to find ways to complement other instruments and do that really well but tastefully. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, so tell me, how does your setup help you achieve that?
Yeah. So I'm a big believer in making one trip from your car to the church and not hurting your back in the process. And so these tools allow me to do everything on a Sunday morning really well without bringing in a bunch of cases and a bunch of gear. And sort of like Ben's philosophy, I'm not a believer in switchers or presets or anything. They limit you, and if you're spending more time programming than you are playing, then you're probably doing it wrong. And so all of these tools, they are very straightforward. They're relatively cheap, because if they break, I need to replace them on the road. That's easy to do. And so let me just kind of run through the rig real fast and just kind of explain in very vague details kind of how I do this. And this applies for keys players as well. Some of these same concepts will work. So I have my guitar, obviously. If you're the only guitar player, try to choose a guitar that it's hard to explain this real well, but like it kind of fills out the whole EQ spectrum. It's like a Strat, that's more of the high end. If you do like a Les Paul, that's more of the low end. Gretsch's, they're really, really good at filling out the whole EQ spectrum. So you'll hear that's just my clean tone. You hear the lows, you hear the highs. I've played with guys. They're like they just bring a Strat, and it doesn't fill out space like it needs to. And so I try to choose a guitar for the service that I know will fill space. If I'm playing with another guitar player, communication is real key. So I'm asking them, hey, what guitar are you bringing? I'm going to bring the opposite of what you're bringing. If they're bringing a Les Paul, I'm bringing a Strat, so I can fill that space. And so, yeah, knowing your guitar is also really important. If you don't know your guitar, none of this is going to help. So let me run through this real fast. So guitar, obviously, and then I run straight into a compressor. So basically, a compressor is taking your guitar signal and squishing it and then sustaining it. And so if I play real hard, you'll hear how it softens it. If I play real light, it loudens it. So this is with it's off. And then real hard. And so it's just leveling out my signal altogether. And there's some guys that don't use compressors. If you develop a really good touch, you won't need it. But I am playing a lot, and I just don't really have time to worry about dynamics and stuff. So I rely on a pedal to help me. And so from my compressor pedal, I get to a tuner pedal, which is the most important pedal that you could ever buy. I can't reiterate this enough. Like, tuning is the most important thing I think that you need to worry about on a Sunday morning. If you're not in tune, none of these other pedals or what you're playing are going to sound good, and they're not going to help. They're going to be distracting, honestly. You're there to help glorify Jesus and lead others to Him. And if you're being a distraction because of your tuning, then that's a problem. So tuning is really important. I'm tuning probably every song. I mean, whenever I'm not playing, I'm usually tuning just to double check and double check and double check. Because guitars will detune because of bad weather and stuff. I live in Dallas, so we just had a big cold front come through, and so all my guitars were real messed up. So that's my tuner pedal, and then I go to a octave pedal, which is doubling my signal. So I'll show you what that means. So one note. So it's adding a lower octave and a higher octave. And so this is great for lead lines. If you're the only guitar player, this pedal will help you a ton, just like sound huge, basically. It's pretty straightforward. And you can play octaves on the guitar, but those are pretty hard to do sometimes. So that's great for lead lines and kind of just like swelling moments, which I'll talk about later. And then let me go to my drive section. So my philosophy with drives is I like to have a clean overdrive pedal and then a overdrive pedal that has a lot of mid-range in it. And so for my clean pedal, I use the RC Booster. It's just kind of a straight clean palette. So clean signal. And then this is the RC Booster. It doesn't add a ton of mid-range. It just fills stuff out. And then for my mid-range, I use a full drive. So here's so you'll hear that all that mid-range is coming through, and that's what I use for all my lead lines to poke through the mix real well. And then stacking overdrives is huge. So you can have all the mid-range you want, but you might need to be a little louder. And so I stack the RC booster and the full drive. So here's full drive. RC booster. And that kind of just helps me cut. You know, if it's a big, like we're going to do great things here in a minute, I will stack both of these just to help me kind of lift up above the mix. Okay, and then out of that, volume pedal. For guitar players, volume pedals are really useful for swells. You can do it with your hand, with your guitar knob right here, but it doesn't work most of the time. These are really useful. You can use them a bunch of different ways. I mainly have it just to mute my signal real fast if I need to come out of a moment, and then also use it for swells, obviously. So it's pretty straightforward. So out of that, I'm going to all of my wet section, so my modulation, my delays, and my reverb. And here's how I think about this section of the board. Your vertical axis is your trails. Your vertical axis is your modulation, so your pitch. Horizontal is your trails. And then your Z-axis is how far back in the mix you are.
Some Cal 3.
Yeah, right, Cal 3. Exactly, yeah. This is just how I visualize it. So, yeah, so I have two different delays on my board right now. I have a digital delay that I can store all my BPMs in for very exact songs and lead parts. And then I have a delay pedal that I use just to tap in for like if we're doing random moments. I can tap in the delay without having to worry about changing the BPM on this guy. And then I also stack delays a ton. For swells, stacking delays is huge. So I'll show you. So for my digital delay, I use a lot of dual delays in it. So you hear how they're panned in stereo? That helps make your guitar sound huge, especially when you're the only guitar player. Having stereo is huge with the delay pedal. And then for my other delay, which is mono, it's like very straightforward in the mix. And so when you stack them, you have them ping-ponging, and then you have one down the middle. And for lead lines and stuff, that is huge because that fills so much space. You don't want to overdo it because it can get in the way of your playing. So I have the mix on these, pretty far back. And then reverb, I just use an old RV5. To me, hall reverbs and shimmer reverbs are great for worship stuff. I tend to go with like a hall reverb with a little bit of shimmer in it. So it's a modulate setting, so it has some of that low end, but some shimmer in it. But the most important thing you need to worry about with reverb is your mix level. So this is how far. I had a sound engineer explain this to me for live stuff, especially in mixing too. Like reverb either pushes you back in the mix or pushes you forward. So if I have my reverb delay or reverb mix all the way up, it sounds kind of cool. But in the mix with drums and some like keys and bass and stuff, I'm going to be so far back, nobody's going to hear me, basically. If I have just a little bit of mix, sounds kind of cool, but I'm poking through a lot. And so finding that balance between where you are in the mix, like on your Z-axis, is very important. And like making a relationship with a sound person on your church staff is huge because they can kind of talk with you about that and kind of give you pointers on what you should do. And then for amp stuff, I use amp modelers because I don't want to carry big amps into churches, and I'm always on the run. So I use a stereo amp modeler called the ACS1 from Walrus Audio, and that helps me just get the best amp tone I can without carrying a bunch of gear in. And this is cool because it has presets and stuff. I only use one preset, and it's stereo. This board can also run mono in case a church needs me to do that. But yeah, I think I kind of covered everything.
That's great.
So-
So a couple of observations. The first is that the guitar and the amp are really being accented by everything that's on the board.
Yeah.
There's not anything. You're not at any point playing a pedal, right? Your pedals are helping your tone.
Yeah.
That is just very basic. Your guitar and your amp. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. And again, reverb is not super heavy. In fact, you're getting most of your texture from your delays, probably.
Right.
Yeah. And then even on your pitch shifting with your POG, your dry signal is still super forward.
Yeah.
You're blending in a little bit of octave.
Right. Yeah. So if I
Why
had-
is that?
So here's what it would sound like. Basically, I want 3 octaves. I don't want 2 octaves. And then with pitch shifters, the technology hasn't been perfected, and so there's some artifacts that you'll hear. So I'll show you. This is with the mix all the way down. So it's real thin. Doesn't really sound that great. Dial your guitar signal back in 100%. So you retain your tone that you were using, but you're just adding octaves to it.
Yeah.
So
That's great.
Yeah.
So when you're thinking about, okay, you have a couple of jobs. You have playing lead lines, you have playing rhythm guitar, and you have complementing keys and padding moments. So what is changing between those roles
yeah. So
as
not-
far as your effects go?
Totally, yeah. For me, I'm either turning drives or delays on and off. And so lead lines, I usually just keep the dual delay I've been using and just turn on an overdrive. Because I have the spread I want. I just need to poke through the mix more. And then for swelly stuff, I need to turn on another delay or reverb to help me get the trails that I want. And I could keep drives on as long as it kind of fits the moment. Like if we're doing like a bridge, having a drive on and doing swells will help those swells cut through the mix a little bit. If we're in a prayer moment, I'll turn drives off just so it's not distracting. But yeah, it's usually I'm usually turning drives or delays on and off.
Yeah. So you're basically just toggling stuff. You're not jumping to your here's my pad setting.
Right.
Here's my lead setting.
Yeah.
That's cool. Okay, so that's really helpful. Just for time purposes, I want to pause real quick and do a little application stuff. So, any worship leaders in the room who don't play electric or keys? Okay, that's great. So, a lot of times the responsibility to lead you guys in these moments falls on them. And if they don't play this stuff, it can be hard to know how to lead. So what are some good things, just wrapping up the sound and the tone section, what are some ways that they can lead keys and electric players well, that's clear and helpful? Maybe what are some things that aren't so helpful? Yeah.
That was a great question.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of an answer.
My experience has been like nailing down song structure before you show up on a Sunday morning. Because adding and subtracting stuff can get real wacky for guitar players, especially because we're so dialed into knowing exactly what we're playing. And, you know, it's good practice to show up and, you know, not know what to expect because you need to learn to be flexible.
That's good.
But, yeah, just kind of nailing down structure. So,
Yeah, I second that, and I think divulging on what you mean by that, I think dynamic structure, especially, like, are we starting down? Are we starting up? Are we going down in the bridge and then going up? Are we staying down? Is the last chorus big? Is it quiet? Is it big and then quiet? Like making sure we are 1,000% on the same page with all of that stuff is really going to help me understand kind of what sound is expected of me during those different moments, and more than that, just what sound is going to fit the best, what's going to serve the song, the best, the most musically. So I think being on the same page on those things is important. And then I think for keys specifically, probably understanding kind of what's the goal of color, probably that color parameter. So if you're a worship leader and you're trying to think of, man, keys just like something's off. There's a miss here somewhere with tone or something. I think color is probably one of the parameters that's maybe more often maybe at fault. Like maybe, hey, we're way too bright and excited in this song. It's an emotional, like intimate song. We need to dial that back. And so if you understand that and you have the language just to say that, and your keys player understands that as well, that's a great immediate thing that you can both work on and fix, as opposed to or trying to figure out what each other is talking about. It's like if we're speaking different languages, like, oh, it sounds too happy, like is that the chord I'm playing? Is that like what setting is that? But if we're talking about color, brightness, darkness, bam, we both know. Let's work on that. See if that fixes.
Would y'all say the same is true for like a drummer, and whoever's doing MD? If y'all have that role, like how can drummers, echo that or even divulge in a more helpful way, and think through that?
So drummers are controlling dynamics more than anybody else.
Yeah,
and so, I think they need to know the songs in and out more than anybody else, honestly. And so them leading us in a set, them telling us, hey, let's build up here. Let's repeat this section. And usually, like, the keys player will have an empty mic as well, calling out structure. But drummers are controlling the dynamics more than anybody else. So
yeah, absolutely. That cutoff filter we talked about earlier, I mean, that's not going anywhere if the drummer's not going anywhere. We're not going here if the drummer is not building as well. So I'm listening to them, I'm watching them, and yeah, for sure my dynamics are locked into drummers. So same thing almost though, just drummers being confident in the structure and kind of knowing where they're going. Being confident in their worship leader and kind of knowing what they are usually doing, understanding their body language, and if they're going to do something spontaneous, kind of knowing what that looks like, and then just confidently following them, just knowing. And the rest of the band, keys and electric especially will follow the drums for sure.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Okay, so we talked a lot about sound, talked a lot about really, I hope y'all know that it's very simple rigs, not a lot going on, but a lot of impact as well. So now, away from the tools a little bit, and let's talk about some moments. So at least here at Grace, we have 3 very, very consistent moments that keys and electric players are going to play a huge role in shaping the dynamics of. The first is going to be like the start of a service. Okay, so a pad fade in during a host moment. We typically start our services with a host moment. A lot of churches start with a song up front, and then they do some kind of welcome or something. In either case, there's a start to the pad, right? There's a fade in. Second moment is going to be similar to what we started with: call to worship, prayer, scripture reading. And then the third moments are going to be transitions in between songs. And transitions may hold the call to worship, the prayer, a host moment. Sometimes they are just transitions in and of themselves. And so let's start from the top. And if y'all could just pop through what you're thinking about when you're starting a service. Ben, if you're going to be padding, bringing in something for a host moment to start a service, what are you thinking about?
Awesome. Well, I'm thinking I really hope my low pass filter is where it needs to be and not on like the brightest, highest string settings, because if I'm starting this thing and I'm very exposed, I really don't want to look dumb because everyone's going to know it was me. So for sure, as subtle as possible. My goal is absolutely as subtle as possible. If someone cannot even notice that I snuck in there, and then at some point they're like, "Oh, I wonder where that pad came from." Like, that's my goal. That would make me happy. That's not always possible. But so let's say someone's like talking, Trey's blah blah blah. He's talking. So I have a fader right here that I'm just barely sneaking up like that. And so if somebody's speaking, somebody's giving instructions, someone's talking, I hesitate to say you need a whole lot more than this right off the bat. I mean, this just gives you a little bit of a texture. It kind of focuses the mind, kind of like Trey was talking about, on that what is being said is of importance, but it's not distracting in and of itself. You may not even notice it. So that's really what I'm thinking about. And then I'm very carefully listening to kind of what they're saying, and if it's possible for me to know ahead of time, like what the ending is, like if the ending is a prayer, for example, they're gonna pray and then we start the next song. And that's great. I'm listening for amen, because that's gonna tell me when it's time to kind of switch to something that's less subtle and that's more musical, that's more for the song that we're about to do. And so that's for sure what I'm thinking about for that setting. Now let's say he talks for 17 minutes. This is gonna sound, like the same two notes for 17 minutes after a while. So if you do have to introduce some variety in padding, there's kind of two scenarios that you would have to do this. The first scenario would be you're by yourself. The other would be that you're in a full band setting, maybe with an electric guitar player who might be doing that as well. Let me talk about my philosophy for when I'm by myself, and then I'll talk about the other one. But basically, just remaining as simple as possible is always kind of the goal. And so, I mean, even just going between a 1-5 chord and then a sustain chord, I mean, sounds really nice. The thing about pad is you can hold that out for, 20 seconds, maybe even, before you have to change to the next one. So when somebody's speaking, it's very easy to get on top of them and become distracting. So as long as you can hold stuff out without jumping through 6 changes or something while somebody's speaking, obviously that's kind of silly. So, but as simple and as drawn out as I can make that. Were you gonna say something?
That's great.
Okay,
that's great. So the 1-5, if you're in the key of D, you have D, E, F sharp, G, A. So the D and the A are going to be that.
Yep.
The main things in the Nashville number system.
Yep.
That we're working around. Right.
So you take like a D triad, right? Like that one, then you just take away the middle one, so it's those two together.
So let's pause right there for a second and keep that going. And if you have the 1 and the 5, Ethan, how does that influence what you're playing in these moments?
Yeah, totally. This is the fun part for electric players. So most of the time, we're also playing the 1 and 5. We might go like a 1 and 4, do like a little suspension thing. So Ben, just play, just turn the pad up a little bit.
Yeah.
And so we'll probably just like kind of swell on the 1 and 5 a little bit. You go to your 4 chord. You on? There we go. Nice. Hanging out in the 1 and 5. The 1 and 4. Thirds are really knowing when to implement thirds into swelling and padding is really important. So in a scripture moment where it's a very hopeful passage, adding a third on top of that can create some emotion and energy.
Yeah,
so Ben,
a major third.
A major
right?
third, not a minor third, a major third. Ben, turn that pad back on. I'll show you what I mean. Bro. Yeah, sure. So this is my 1 and 5. I go to a 4. So here's it with a third on top. So it kind of adds this like lifting kind of musical presence to whatever's being read.
And there's direction to it.
There's direction to it, yeah. So leading tones are important when you're doing that stuff, knowing what notes what needs to follow after what note. Usually you're going up or down. You're not staying on the same note. And so, yeah, just kind of like knowing when to do that. Usually you're just hanging out on the root and the 5th for most stuff. And then maybe, if you're doing a 1, 4, 5, you're 1 and 4. And then for 5s, when padding, I like to do suspension. So instead of...
So go to an
So this is D. This is your A chord. Sounds kind of cheesy. I like to keep the 1 instead of the 7. It adds direction basically to this.
It keeps
to
you
this
rooted
thing.
in your home base.
Right,
kind of.
exactly.
Yeah.
So just knowing like those kinds of shapes and music theory is really important as well. So just understanding that in general.
That's awesome.
It's really helpful.
So let's say, for example, so song 1 after the host moment is in the key of D, and it has a keys intro that Ben is going to start right away. Ben, how does that influence what you play in this moment?
The key.
Let me ask a very direct question. Are you going to play the intro part right away in the pad, or are you going to wait?
No, yeah, I would.
Okay,
wait.
so talk about how you build up to that.
Okay, yeah. Let me before we lose this moment right here, I just want to add that I don't know if y'all noticed, but while Ethan was doing all of that, this is where I'm living right here, which is on the 1 chord, and then I have a 5th going like we talked about earlier, a triad without the 3. And when you're in a full band setting, this is where keys is pretty easy. This is just kind of where you hang out. And you don't have to worry about this getting like monotonous because we have movement from the electric. And so I'd say the odds of us getting on top of each other are going to increase if I'm like moving around all over the place. Unless we're like playing a specific progression or something, I would just live right here and let the movement come from electric. There's plenty of other times that you'll be like on your own exposed in the setting that you might want to provide some of your own movement. So that's what I would say about that.
Especially if you're not on click.
Yeah.
One person needs to be static and the other person needs to be moving.
Yeah, for sure.
If they're both moving, it can get real messy real fast.
Trey, what did you ask me again? So,
I asked.
Oh, I remember. Okay. So man, leading up to that song.
Here's why I asked this, because for everyone in the room, drummers, worship leaders, we need to feel. We need to know, like, okay, if Ben is going to be padding, like, how can we maximize this moment and kind of propel us in to the first song?
For sure.
Really well. Because a lot of times, at least at Grace, a lot of our drummers are cueing tracks. And so if they're listening for any sort of clue on, hey, this is the time, to cue this track, to set you up well for your keys intro,
yeah,
what is that going to look like?
Cool. So, man, in that setting, I probably would not even bring in a key sound. If we're in a full band setting, if electric is providing some movement, I'm not worried about this just, getting boring at some point. We're not here for long enough. I don't see a reason even to bring in, let's say we're doing like King of Kings. I don't know if there's much reason for me to be moving around a whole lot here. If we're getting movement from electric, I probably would just sit back and, man, once that intro comes in, it gives you somewhere to go. If you haven't heard keys yet, as soon as it starts, it sort of provides that propelling forward that Trey was talking about. So I would always err on the side of, I feel like the further you go in music, the more you figure out that just, man, less is more. Just keeping something in your back pocket, keeping something else that you can add in there. And so in this setting, that would for sure be keys. If I, showed my cards too soon and I was like padding around like, we went down instead of up. So keeping away from that, and that was an exaggerated example, obviously. But man, if we just go from this to, there's just something about going from nothing to.
That's awesome.
It's way less stuff.
Yeah.
But somehow the impact is way more. So
that's awesome.
I would for sure venture towards that side of things than the other.
So in that case, that's really good. If in this case, keys is static, electric is dynamic, but the keys has the intro.
Right.
Then where do you go when the intro starts? Ethan?
Yeah. So some of the best guitar players know when not to play rather than when to play. And so you just need to kind of feel the moment out. most of the time I'm doubling the lead line with him. And so I'll turn on my Pog and my delays. And I'll go up high because he's playing low, and I don't want to get in the way of what he's doing. And so I'll lightly double what he's doing just to create some energy, you know, going into the song. If we're in if we're in the middle of a set and it's like a prayer moment, probably won't do that, honestly. I'll probably just step back.
That's good.
And not do anything.
So the dilemma that's presented is if keys is static on that pad and electric is providing the movement and the texture, what we don't want to happen is for keys to come forward and electric just drop out, because then there's all this space that was there that's now not, and it feels different. So
Right.
So what Ethan
went
is
down
saying,
again
yeah.
instead
So
of
what
up.
Ethan is saying is he's not going to come all the way out, but what he's doing is now again more of an accent roll. And so just thinking about, you know, where you're taking people with your instrument is kind of the theme here. So I want for you guys to be able to demonstrate kind of in context, you know, how y'all would go about doing this. And so we have time for, I think, one example. And so the example that I want to do, and then we can briefly just talk through changes with the other example will be, so we're going to do an outro, okay, full band of Great Things, which is upbeat in the key of A. We'll crash out, and we'll plan to transition into King of Kings, and I'm going to go right back to Psalm 100, okay? And so after verse 5 that talks about the loyal love of God enduring forever, I'll kind of cue King of Kings, and then we'll go from there. And y'all will just be able to hear how they would navigate that moment. Does that sound good?
Yeah,
Sounds good.
Okay. So, and I'm not going to sing when we get to King of Kings, so sorry. Okay, so here's Great Things. We got a 1 bar count into the outro. Ready? Give me that pad. Let's see that fade in to the key of A, Ben. Yeah, very nice. Okay, so here's this big outro coming up in 1, 2, 3, 4. Transition to D. Psalm 100. Shout out praises to the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord with joy. Enter his presence with joyful singing. Acknowledge that the Lord is God. He made us and we belong to him. We are his people, the sheep of his pasture. Enter his gates with thanksgiving and his courts with praise. Give him thanks. Praise his name, for the Lord is good. His loyal love endures, and he is faithful through all generations.
2, 3,
So as we continue to
4.
sing, let's remember that our joy comes from being found in the Lord and being his sheep today. Nice. That's great.
Verse 1.
So what were some things that y'all were thinking about with the passage, with transitioning from the key of A to the key of D? Ben, why don't you start with that? Because that
For
was
sure. Well, that's an easy transition because that's just going to the 4 chord
Yeah.
of the previous song. So just to put that in context, we went from key of A, which sounds like this, to key of D, which that just sounds great just by itself. So that is it's going to be a good day. That's the easiest transition you can do.
So what you're doing though, when you end Great Things, what are you doing with your sounds? Are you pulling anything out? Are you?
For sure.
Yeah.
So we hit that big outro. We just hit a big one. That's kind of where we landed, right? So I'm gonna let keys die out, and so I'm gonna kind of pull my fader back, kind of sneakily, so I'm not still playing that. So I'm pulling those out, subtly, letting the note ring out, and then letting it go. And then I'm kind of waiting for a subtle moment to make this change just kind of as easily as possible. So I'll probably sneak some of those D's in there, and then the key of A is gone, and we go to the key of D. So that's usually my approach to that perfect scenario transition,
Yeah.
which happens every now and then. But Usually it's a lot less easy than that.
Yeah. Ethan, what about in the context of the psalm? Like, what were some things you were hearing and responding to in that?
Totally. Yeah. So that transition, electric players are covering up usually trails so keys players can transition to the next key. And so
Yeah.
I thought it was two outros, but it wasn't. So usually I'd go down low and just hit it A and let it ring out
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of bring my volume pedal back. And Ben will usually already be in the next key.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
so I'm relying on the keys player to get to the next key. And then once he's there, then I can start complimenting on what he's doing.
Yeah. That's good.
So
Cool.
And I might add that all of the thinking that went into that, it's for at least for keys, at least for this role, it has to happen like before we get to that moment. I can't be at the end of great things and be like, how are we gonna get to the next song? Like how's that gonna look? So a big part of my prep for Sundays or for whatever we're leading for is thinking about transitions, because that's something that I want to stress about so that the worship leader doesn't have to stress about, because that's not something they have control over. So I want to be sure I know transitions and I know how we're going to attempt to do them, at least, so that when we get in the moment, I've thought about it, I've practiced it, I'm ready for it. I've looked ahead and I'm like, okay, A to D. Oh, it's going to be a good day. It's an easy transition. We're just going to go right to that. So, but that thinking has to happen ahead of time. That's not one of those things I feel like that you can do on the fly very well. And so being aware of, okay, man, I have to bail right here at the very end of the song, and I got to get that next key in there as quick as possible, because there's only so long that Ethan can ring out on that note before I got to reappear again. So.
Yeah.
one thing to add, we do this a lot at Watermark, is we like to figure out, okay, like if we're going from A to D, D is the 4 in the key of A. So what if we just all land on the 4 in the
that's
key of D and we're already there?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something y'all can think about as well. The worship leader can make that call, but usually we'll go out of that outro of great things, go straight to the D, and then we're already in that key.
Mhm.
And so now we can start padding and swelling without having to make
Yeah.
that weird transition.
That's
Right.
also a super easy thing for a drummer to listen to as well. It's like if you're thinking about, exactly what you said. If we're switching keys, and it's an easy progression into that same key, drummers listen, and I would encourage y'all to make that call in rehearsal and lead out in that way, because it's super low bar but very impactful as well. Ben, do you have anything else to add on that?
No, I think it's great.
So
Well said.
so one last little point, and then we'll do Q&A and wrap up. What if we're transitioning from a key that does not play nice with the previous key? So that's not a 4 or a 5 of the previous one.
So most of the other ones
Yeah.
that there are. So this is I feel like this is hard sometimes for our like worship church brains, because we're just like, service starts, pad has to start, and then it doesn't stop until we leave. You know, that's just kind of what we're used to. And
Yeah, we hate silence.
yeah, we do.
Yeah.
But I have to say, a little bit of silence like never killed anybody
Yeah.
that I know of. I'm not sure how that would
Yeah.
how that would happen. But I mean, just listen to, like, let's go from A to C. So, like, there is no nice way to make this transition. Like, that's just like, what
Yeah.
just happened. Are we in like some
You
kind
could
of,
do A minor.
some kind of a
just-
movie?
Yeah.
So that being said, so in that scenario, I think the contrast between those two is way more hurtful than anything that was gained from it being seamless.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, in context, they're not good together. So in those, if I looked on the set and it said, hey, key of A, trash can out, key of C is the next song, I would be like, oh boy, okay. So my transitional goal for that one is going to be that we, like, trash can nice and big and full. And as that, big, what I mean by that is just like hitting the cymbals and everybody kind of swelling a little bit. And so as we kind of create that energy, as that comes down, let that note just kind of end and get almost all the way to silence before I dare bring in that C that's going to be so like contra the other
Yeah.
way. And so I think this is a good point to make, because sometimes I feel like worship leaders, people picking songs, will just overstress about transitions, because they're for sure the most probably nerve-wracking part of a service. It's the most kind of exposed part where everyone's kind of wondering, okay, what are we going to do next? What song are we singing again after this? And so if you just pick a song that has an easy transition, then, hey, you don't have to worry about that. We don't ever have to have a moment of silence. But I think that just a half second of silence, if you can practice and learn and kind of train your ear to do that well, it really is not going to sound awkward in a corporate setting. In fact, it gives your ears a nice little bit of a rest before you go into the next one. If you ever go to getting out of like the ministry world, if you ever go to like a show, like they're taking breaks all the time just to like let stuff come down and like reset to the next song or to talk to the crowd, and our ears don't. That doesn't bother us at all to go down. So let me just, in context, like give an example of what I would. I keep playing that A minor. Okay, da 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 da. So we celebrate out, and like we have cymbals going, and I'm just gonna let that go. And then as I kind of hear it ending, a little silence, never hurt anybody. And we bring in C, and see how there was none of that weird contextual minor stuff. They were both just like root keys, and so
Yeah, great.
that would be my approach to that for sure. A little silence. Never hurt anybody. Now, don't like sit here for 3 minutes and be like now.
Yeah.
Bring it in. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because that'll feel odd.
That's
But,
great.
Yeah. If you're quick and intentional and confident about it, it'll probably look like you meant to do it.
That's awesome. Well, y'all have given us a lot of really, really, really great things to think about, a lot of great conceptual things, but a lot of practical things as well. So for the last few minutes that we have, want to kick it to you guys. Do y'all have any questions for Ben or for Ethan? So I'm going to repeat the question for video purposes. So Andrew's asking, in scenarios where his example was he's playing acoustic, there's a keys player and a bass player, which is sick. But there's no electric player.
That's what we have,
And yeah, so how if in any ways does this methodology change in smaller settings in our
For
full
sure.
bands?
Okay. So sit over there. We do stuff like that all the time, where it's like either just us two or maybe us two and like a female vocal, and there are some very easy ways to make it very dynamic. The main thing is just figure out when either of us are going to play and figure out when we're not, because you have 2 layers basically. Well, with bass, I guess you have 3 layers. But the way you're going to create dynamic is by, it's kind of what we said earlier, just like don't show all your cards all at once. If there's a song like Goodness of God, that's like very like acoustic driven intro, keys needs to be like gone, like non-existent, needs to be saving whatever is in the tank for that first chorus to add, something new, a new sound that's going to lift it even further. Same with bass. Bass needs to know when not to play, and then you as acoustic need to know when not to play. Maybe that bridge when we're coming down, maybe acoustic bails and it's just diamonds on the keys, and then when you add that rhythm back in, that does something interesting, like reinserting that into the mix. So more than like volume and more than technique, I think that is what is gonna like make the realest, like most musical kind of a difference. In any setting where you're more limited in kind of who you have. And then another thing you could add with keys is keys has kind of this nice, like, we have a lot of range where we can go in the middle, then we can go high, or we can go low. My philosophy is typically to start in the middle, like somewhere. Like I really kind of live somewhere around here for the most part. And then as we like get more, like I can, like the more I spread out, the more energy I'm adding. Does that make sense? Whereas if I come more inward back to here, and live around here, that can add some dynamic. So that's kind of an easy way. Maybe you can tell your keyboard player, like, hey, play more in the middle when we're down, and then give me more low octaves, or come up higher when we're
That's
we're
really
lifting.
good. That's really good. Ethan, I want to ask, so let's say there's a world where there's a full-ish band but no keys player. How does that change what you do as a guitar player?
Yeah, so I get to do all the pads and rhythm and lead, which is real fun. Trust me. Yeah, so basically I'm worrying about transitions of songs. So when I'm coming out of Great Things and going to Waymaker or whatever song, and what am I doing with my trails? So I usually let my trails die out just before they hit 0, and then I come in the new key And especially if you're the only electric player, knowing when to pad, when to play rhythm, and when to play lead is really important. And so
That's like our world.
Yeah,
is one
right.
guitar player.
Right.
Yeah.
Cool. And so if you have to do all three of those, like, let's go. Like, you got this, guys. But yeah, it gets kind of frustrating if there's no keys player because you're having to fill a lot of space. Because usually you have a bass player and a keys player and all that mid range is there. Now you're filling all of the mid range, and so worrying about what do I play low? Do I play high? You're usually going to be playing low, and maybe some of your lead lines will be low instead of high, because you need to fill that space in the middle. So,
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Ben and Ethan? Jordan. So Jordan's question is a lot of emphasis given to making things sound full and covering different ranges of sound. Why is that important?
For sure. Okay, let me define fullness. When I use the word fullness, what I mean is we have the full spectrum of the sound present. That wasn't really helpful. That was basically saying the same thing. Like we have the lows, and then we have the mids, and then we have all the way to the highs, like all the way up there. And so a good song has all of those levels of the spectrum present at the right volume. So no one is dominating. Nobody is. It's not just like all bass and that's all you can hear. It's not just all high cymbals and that's all you can hear. It's not all just like weird heady like head voice right here because that sounds like McDonald's. But that's how when we arrive at a song, when we hit that big chorus, when we hit that big bridge, when we are at the highest energy that we want to get to, that energy is not really achieved by volume as much as it is by reaching that full spectrum. So a little something as simple as bass waiting to come in until a chorus or the second verse or something is going to make you lift emotionally and musically way more than just playing louder or harder is. So a lot of times when you're missing energy, when you're missing like, it's not like I'm like strumming as loud as I can or I'm singing as like passionately as I can, but there's nothing, we're not like there. A lot of times that's what's missing is somewhere in the spectrum something is missing. And a lot of times it can be low end or mid, a lot of times it can be like any area. But yeah, when we talk about fullness, that's wise, because without fullness in the mix, we can't arrive at the energy level that we want to get to on our big choruses or our big bridges and stuff like
So
that.
as an example, Ben was playing the exact same things earlier, but simply by increasing the frequency of his low pass filter, he's adding energy, and he's actually not even moving. What would be doubly effective is if he was also moving outwards and bringing that filter up. And so, again, what you're adding there is not volume. You're kind of adding volume, but it's because you're adding more frequencies into the mix.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
That's not to say volume isn't negligible. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Ethan, do you have anything to add on that?
yeah, I like to think of instruments as neighbors. And so am I fighting my neighbor or am I greeting my neighbor? And so, especially in an EQ range, like everything's providing glue. You don't want stuff to like rub against each other and fight. And so like with mid-range stuff, me and Ben are in the mid-range no matter what we do. Am I, dialing in my sound to kind of scoop my sound away from Ben, or am I trying to get into Ben's way and kind of like force him out of that?
Yeah.
And so just being like kind of mindful of that, and that plays into like filling out sound, because like if I'm here, Ben's here,
Yeah.
you kind of have the full spectrum. If we're both on top of each other, we're not filling it
Right,
much
something's
sound
missing.
out, Yeah.
So one thing I love, Ethan, about your rig, and I haven't heard many guitar players say this, but you have a drive setting specifically to give you more mid-range, not necessarily more dirt or drive.
Totally.
And so in the context of this question, if Ethan kicks this on and Ben widens an octave to the left and to the right, not only does Ethan have his boost helping him, but Ben is also helping him cut more as well. And so if you turn that on while Ben is in the middle, it's not going to have the same effect, and you're actually going to probably mask each other quite a bit. So, yeah, that's awesome. Any other questions? That was a great question, Jordan.
Yeah.
So Andrew asked for more inexperienced musicians like me. How can Andrew communicate
Whatever, dude.
the principles of, of sonic cohesion, like filling different frequency spectrums? One answer is to go from here, and then you can have these conversations with these musicians right away. So that's a part of the big point of this. That's awesome. But if you're an inexperienced musician, if you're meeting up with someone and trying to explain these things, what would you say?
Man, I think I would actually try and explain it. I think it's sort of daunting as a concept if you try to understand all of it, and like you look at like a soundboard, and it looks like you're driving a spaceship, and you're like, what is EQ? What is all of this? I don't know. But the concept underneath it isn't too bad. You're just talking about the spectrum of sound. You're talking about lows and highs. Everyone can understand lows and highs. Like, this is low, this is high. And so understanding like where those are at. What's harder is getting them from understanding that point to how to do something with that, how to make different musical choices because of that. And so I guess speaking specifically from keys, I would probably try and just break it down as simply as possible. And I don't think I would say much more than that. Just that the fullness of the sound spectrum. When we get to our big chorus, that's where we want to get. That's where we want to arrive at, is a fullness. And so any choices you can make to try and save that fullness until we get to that point are going to be musically helpful. They're going to give us somewhere to go, give us another card in the back pocket that we can pull out when we get to that point. So a simple thing, I guess, that I would tell keys players, well, I guess I kind of said it already, but just trying to stay in the middle, I think, can be good advice. That's just kind of like a practical, like, try to hang out more here in the middle, and then trying to, insert your low octaves and higher stuff later on in the song. I guess I don't really know a whole lot of how I would explain that for other instruments. It's a great question, and it's a hard... It's hard. It's tricky to think about it that way if you're not used to thinking about it that way. But I do think that the concept underneath it, as long as we don't add too much of the extra stuff, isn't too bad. And if somebody is able to like get that part of it, then the musical choices that follow from that are gonna make a little more sense, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, adding on to that, like in your case, acoustic, bass, keys. I think explaining the bass is covering the low end. So as a keys player, you need to provide the lead lines, which is your lead, and then maybe in the verses play rhythm. And so like explaining lead is usually high, rhythm's usually low. That's a simple way for them to understand that without explaining frequencies and like all that stuff. You know what I mean? Because the bass is already covering a lot of ground, and so the keys player is just adding on top of that.
Yeah.
So,
In a lot of ways, if you say high or low, you're actually talking about frequencies as well, because everything that has a pitch is a frequency, and so you can talk about that stuff later if you want, but even moving up and down, high and low, that's helpful. Okay. Can we give Ben and Ethan a round of applause? Thank them for coming. Really appreciate you guys a ton. We have to get out of here pretty soon. So I'd love to pray for us, and then we'll figure out how to facilitate a time if you want to come up and ask Ben and Ethan some questions and talk about this stuff more in depth. So let's go to the Lord in prayer. Father, we thank you so much for being a God who is worthy of beautiful music. And thank you for creating a world that has music in it. Thank you for wiring us to appreciate it and be moved by it for your glory and your worship. And I pray that everything that we discussed tonight, everything we learned, may be glorifying to you. And may we just think of opportunities, and may you put people in our lives to share this with. So help us do that well. Help us disciple people to your Son, Jesus. And we're thankful for him. We thank you for the truth of the gospel. He died and rose again for our forgiveness and salvation. We ask all of these things in your Son, Jesus' name, by the power of your Holy Spirit. Amen.